What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back with another video about Killers of the Flower Moon, this time with my guest, David Lambert, a man who might have more enthusiasm for Western movies, history, and fiction than anyone I've ever met. And for those of you who might not be familiar with my podcast, Wrong Reel, my episodes with David about directors like Sam Peckinpah and John Ford are some of my all-time personal favorites. So I'll leave a link in the description below for some of those Western conversations. But when he offered earlier, I guess yesterday, to come on the channel and share his thoughts on Killers of the Flower Moon, naturally, I jumped at the opportunity. So, Mr. Lambert, I hope this will be first of many videos where I can entice you to come onto the channel for this particular topic. But let's just dive right in. Where would you like to begin? Like your initial impressions? I know you just got out of the movie, so you're still digesting what you saw. But I feel like, yeah, maybe go first impressions, and then we can dive into perhaps the book and some of the previous attempts to bring this to the screen.
Yes, yeah. My first impression is that I liked it. It's very close to the actual history, from my understanding. So I respect that about it. It is very long. Like, I know that was many people's complaint,
yeah.
And I have some of those same feelings. There's aspects of the movie that I'm still trying to wrap my head around.
Mark Kermode had a great line where he says, "It's a movie where the visuals are designed to be seen on the largest screen humanly possible, but in terms of story construction, it's clearly designed for a streamer." And so it creates this strange tension. We're like, all right, well, obviously the audience for Apple TV Plus is on the Apple devices, but then you have Martin Scorsese pulling out all the stops, delivering this, this visual, just like this epic canvas with which he's telling his story. So I think it's going to be a recurring thing where people are just blown away by the movie, but it is a tough sit on the old tailbone, 3.5 hours in the same room.
Yeah, I mean, it's the length of it is difficult because there is so much story to tell, and I understand like the desire to be respectful of, like, you don't want to necessarily cut out like some of the murders or, change too much, because I know that, they're, one of their, I mean, at least their press release and everything says that, adhering to or being respectful of the Osage nation and all that was, of the utmost importance to them. And, it's well known that the book is more of a procedural, and that they kind of reworked the whole script to not be about, the Jesse Plemons character who's going to be.
Yeah, I heard the book. You could almost look at it as like an origin story for the FBI, as opposed to like the tell-all of the horrors that were committed against the Osage.
Well, really, more the second half of it is more of the FBI stuff. It does really get in depth about the murders and everything. But so they reworked the whole thing because the actual character, the actual person that the Plemons character is based on, it was such an upstanding guy. Like, if you actually like read his story, he's like he seems like he had no flaws at all. And that's not Scorsese's thing. So he wants that tortured guilt storyline. Having said that, I'm still not sure if that was the correct focus, or I don't even know what the correct focus should be.
Yeah, I feel like, I guess in terms of format, I might have recommended that Scorsese do like a 6-episode, like premium prestige miniseries for HBO. But as far as which notes to play and which beats to hit when it comes to the overall story, I started listening to the audiobook right before we started recording. I was like, shit, well, if Lambert's coming on, I better listen to some of it. So I've listened to about an hour of the book, but that's obviously a very, very small sliver of the overall narrative. So I can't speak to what was omitted that should have been included or the reverse.
Yeah, well, and I don't know if you saw at the premiere, they were talking to, what was he, like a dialect coach or something like that. And he had mixed feelings about the movie, about its focus, and I agree with what he's saying to an extent. Having said that, if you do read the book, the the character of Molly, or the actual person, the book literally says, during this horrible time of not knowing if her husband, was responsible for helping carry out these murders and all these other things. It basically says there's no record of what she was feeling, how she acted, or anything. So
and a bit of a cultural thing, or at least in the movie, it seems like the Osage, as a culture, they would look down upon people who flap their gums a little too quickly. They refer to them as like blackbirds and things like that.
Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, it just felt like there was so much of it that was her just kind of looking sad. It's like it really was not an exploration of her or the Osage people, which is fine, because Scorsese is not Osage. He's not the person that you necessarily. It's one of those things where you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Poor, billionaire Scorsese filmmaker. But it is one of those things where there really is, when you are an outsider. And I've worked with natives, and I worked on projects. I live around different reservations. I'm good friends with a lot of natives. I get my acid from the reservation. Am I allowed to say that?
I don't know if it's allowed on YouTube or not. We'll find out once we post this thing. Speaking of which, cheers. I poured a glass of scotch before we started, but I know you're imbibing on your end. So,
we'll
do a special LSD live stream at some point and see who can last longer. I guarantee it'll be you.
Yeah, but it's just, for me, at least my first impression, and I'm still kind of wrestling with the film, is that I can see how much they were trying to be respectful of the Osage and all that, but you can tell Scorsese's interest is in the gangster shit, which is not to classify him as the only gangster filmmaker. I'm not doing that, and I want to preamble. I love Scorsese. I'm not an anti-Scorsese. He's one of my favorite filmmakers. So. But you could tell that is where his interest really is. At least I felt that I still felt that the Osage took a backseat to a certain extent. It was like you kind of saw some interaction between them, and you saw some of the rituals and some of their spirituality. And I
enjoyed the kind of fake stock footage from the 1920s where they're like playing golf and buying fancy coats and driving fancy cars. Like I don't know if there was actually any real I guess like archival footage that could have been incorporated into the film, but at least it was like archival in flavor, and I thought it helped kind of set the tone.
Yeah, a lot like Tombstone.
Yeah, totally.
Well, film. So it was just there was a certain aspect of it that was like, all right. I mean, how many times do I have to see? It was hard. Like, how many times do I have to see DiCaprio, like, he's struggling, and she's on the bed, and it just was. It was like making the same points. And one of the other issues too is that the reality of the actual story is so tragedy upon tragedy, just horror upon horror, that in a cinematic narrative, when you are trying to be accurate and tell it truthfully, it does after a while. You're like, oh, okay, now the kid's dead. Okay, now you know what I mean? It's like, how many times can we have scenes of that? But at the same time, it's one of those things, you don't want to short shift any of it. You don't want to.
And this is what they signed up for. If you're adapting this book and you're trying to turn it into a movie, so maybe now's as good a time as any to talk about what are some of the previous attempts in the past to bring the story to the big screen.
Well, so the first one is a lost film, and it's called the Tragedies of the Osage Hills, and it came out 4 months after the perpetrators were arrested.
Oh Jesus! We're talking like, what would that be, like late 20s, early 30s? Or what would that be?
Yeah. So this is in the 20. What was it? 24? I don't know. I'm terrible with dates, but it was.
And yet you love history. It's ironic.
Well, but it was actually it was directed by an actor, writer, filmmaker named James Youngdeer, and he was actually he was native. He was part black, part native, and he kind of realized when he was in the Navy to stop identifying as black because at that time identifying as a native it was just there was more respect to it. So he ended up becoming a technical advisor for D.W. Griffith.
Gotcha.
And so Pathé, the French film company, they were producing their own westerns, and at this time in the teens, like every month there were like 15 to 20 Native American themed movies coming out. 1 to 2 real films, because they were very popular subject, and it ranged from respectful and not respectful, as you can imagine. But so Pathé, they were trying to make their own westerns, but they're a bunch of French dudes, and their films were always criticized for being inauthentic. And so they got James Youngdeer, his wife, who's also native, Lillian St. Cyr, I think it was her name, and he started making films for them, directing them, writing them, starring in them, and they would have these really multifaceted portrayals of natives. They would sometimes have all native casts. And oftentimes the movies would end with like evil, encroaching whites getting arrested or things like that. So yeah, they basically rushed this film, which was about 80 minutes long. Like I said, came out four months after the arrests of De Niro's character, DiCaprio's character, and all that. And I guess they had wax figures of Hale, the De Niro character, and then I can't remember the guy's name offhand. The cowboy guy with the mustache who got who kind of ratted everybody out after he got hired. Yeah. They had wax figures of them at the premiere of the movie in Oklahoma, and it had
a marketing gimmick that was pretty common back then, or is that?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I want to see what they look like. I'd love to see the photos, but it had a cast of like over 150 natives in it and everything. It ended with the natives and the whites shaking hands under an American flag, so a little bit different than the reality. But it was produced by this hotel owner guy, and James Youngdeer. He ended up suing him over profits and the prints and everything. That guy ended up dying not long after, and so all the prints are lost. So it's a lost film.
Gotcha. Any stills or posters or anything like that remain?
I don't know. I'll have to look it up. There's I wrote about James Youngdeer a little bit in my big Sam Elliott thread, but there's a really good article that came out recently in the Hollywood Reporter that goes into James Youngdeer and his attempt to make, or the making of this Osage film. So he later got in trouble. He had his own sex scandal, like even before Fatty Arbuckle, that almost derailed his career and everything. But yeah, he's one of those interesting figures, and one of those things that people don't know about, the Westerns or portrayals of natives in movies has been, it's been multifaceted. It's not just a recent
for 100 years. Yeah.
It didn't just come about with Dances with the Wolves.
Does anybody know, like, what's the first official, like, one reel or a short film showing the American indigenous, like, in their element? I mean, there's got to be something like the 1890s or early 1900s.
Yeah. I can't remember the specific ones offhand, but there's different footage you can find of natives. Buffalo Bill talking to natives and things like that.
Because one thing I liked about the book, like the little tiny snippet that I've heard so far, is they're talking about how, at least as late as the 1920s, there were parts of Oklahoma that still felt like the Wild Wild West. Like it might be the 1920s or the Roaring 20s in New York, but around some rural parts of Oklahoma, it might as well be 1870. And that had a lot of appeal to a lot of people who wanted to still live a kind of a more laid back Western lifestyle.
Yeah, and I guess jumping back about, perspective, I'm just now reading these books. I was hoping to read them before before the movie came out, but everything there's too much going on. But if people are interested in fictionalized tellings of the Osage, not only the murders but the oil boom, there's a couple novels. There's one called Mean Spirit by Linda Hogan, and it came out in 1991. She's an indigenous author. I think she's Chickasaw, and it was nominated for the Pulitzer. And then there's one from, I think, 2007 by an Osage author named Charles Redcorn, and that one's called A Pipe for February. And the first part of A Pipe for February is exactly the opening scene of Killers of a Flower Moon. So I don't know if it's coincidence or if someone read this book, because it opens with the burying of the pipe doll and the kids peeking through. It's almost exactly like it. So I don't know if maybe that was taken from
a bit. Just because I don't know, because the movie didn't provide this info. How long did the money last for the Osage? Like, how long did the oil last, or how long did the period of prosperity last?
Yeah.
Like, was it one of those things where like they diversified the like into like a more service related economy, or is it one of those things where like when the oil ran out, so did the good times?
No, it just ran out.
Gotcha.
It ran out like not too long after. I don't think there were just decades and decades of. I think it was.
So during the Great Depression, things got hit hard.
Yeah. But I read the book a long time ago, so I don't remember all the details.
That's always the trick. If your prosperity is built upon a finite resource, it's like, oh shit. Well, like, can we invent some additional aspects to our economy between now and then, or is it all just going to implode at a certain point? And yeah, it's a story that happens time and time again. Anytime there's an oil boom.
Yeah, exactly. Or any kind of boom. But
what about any other attempts at telling the story cinematically before Marty took a shine?
Oh yeah, there was the FBI story, which has like a 15-minute segment, the Jimmy Stewart movie.
Gotcha.
And that has a whole like 15-minute segment about the Osage, and it's not very respectful to them. It does really kind of portray them as these silly kind of, look at the silly Indians with money, they don't know what they're doing kind of thing. It's a very vaudevillian, burlesque,
kind of condescending portrayal.
Yeah, condescending portrayal. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, well, let's start getting into the weeds of things, because I want to like pin you down on what you really liked and what you didn't like. And admittedly, you are a Scorsese fan, or a self-proclaimed Scorsese fan. What do you think is like the chief attraction of this movie, where you can really tell your friends or family members, like, look, it's long, and maybe it didn't hit all the beats that I wanted to hit, but you got to see it for X. Like, what would that X be?
Oh, damn. I'm terrible. I hate recommending things to people.
But, what do you think of Lily Gladstone? Let's start with her.
Well, yeah, I thought she was great. And like I said, it's a challenge, because it's hard to know even what to do with that character, because you can't, the actual real person, like, for the longest time would not believe that her husband was responsible or in any way complicit in any of that stuff.
Gotcha.
It really wasn't until he himself like directly admitted it, she would not believe it. And I think the movie kind of tries to make her a little bit more, suspicious, you know what I mean? A little more proactive than I think, at least how she's portrayed in the book.
Especially when she immediately starts feeling better once he's no longer spiking her shots with that additional crap.
Yeah, and that's true. And that is one of the things that,
I should also say, for anybody who has not seen the movie, I probably should have said this at the outset. Spoilers are all fair game. Go see the movie before listening to this podcast. I should have said this at the beginning, but we're recording this in one fell swoop with no editing, so I can't go back and change or fix what I should have said initially.
Whoops. Yeah. Whoops.
I'll put a note in the video description, and that'll be my shield. But I thought that was one of the best parts of the movie, was showing toward the end how Leonardo DiCaprio, his character, he's so compromised in so many ways, and he's been complicit in so many crimes. and yet when he's with her, it seems so genuine, like the love and affection that he feels for her. And it just shows how, yeah, like sick human beings that are part of violent crimes can also at the same time still feel love and affection for people. And I thought that it walked that tightrope where it's like, God damn, I don't really know what to make of this guy, because he has so many like abominable qualities, but he also has this real capacity for love and affection, which seems like when they're in bed hugging and cuddling, or he's joking about how like, oh, you're going to wake the children right before they start doing the nasty, etc. Like the love making, I mean, the love scenes seem genuine.
Yeah. And yeah, and you know, in that in the dialect coach that in that interview that he gave at the premiere, I think that was one of the things that he, I don't know, I don't want to say took offense to, but I think he said found it hard to swallow, is that I think that tightrope of, you know, this guy, you know, is a monster trying to, you know, I think it's sort of like you know, how many movies do we have to have with the conflicted Nazi guy, you know? So I understand his perspective. I think that, and I was feeling that way for a long time. I think that the final scene between them, when she, you know, is asking him what he, you know, what was in the insulin, I feel that that was actually the movie's answer, is that no, this guy did not love her. He convinced himself that he did. You know what I mean? He that was his mind. You know, he's the one that's always saying, you know, but none of his actions ever show that. Just like anyone, just like any kind of abuser is going to convince themselves that they love the person they're abusing.
Well, I guess it wouldn't be the first time somebody has convinced themselves that they're actually in love when they're not, because a marriage might confer certain financial advantages upon them.
Yes, yeah, and the movie walked that tightrope where I was like, what are they, you know, but I think that last scene between them really was, you know, saying like, no, this is a delusion in his mind that he actually loved them. He clearly didn't. So yeah, so that was, and that's one of the other things about the movie that is also one of those things that's it's such a challenge, that you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't, because the actual story is so insane. It's so crazy. You like that even dramatizing it in any accurate sort of way, or a way that makes any kind of sense, is like, you know what, it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. It's right.
Were any of the parts of the story suppressed at all over the years, or was it like a big giant, kind of scandal so much at the time that people took a massive interest in it?
No, it was a pretty big scandal, I believe, but you know, people's attention spans are short. But I think that,
well, especially with the Great Depression right around the corner, suddenly people are like, they move on to other problems.
Yeah, and I also think it becomes one of the, and I also think it does get swept up in the origin story of the FBI, so that it kind of just gets vacuumed up in that bigger narrative, you know, in the American public's mind, you know, through the 20th century. So, but no, I think it was a pretty big scandal for its time.
Gotcha. And does the Osage Nation, like, do they still have a reservation or a community, or where do they stand these days in modern day Oklahoma?
Yeah, they still have the reservation. I mean, I think all the movie was shot.
Yeah, I mean, I guess on YouTube, Apple TV Plus posted a ton of videos ahead of time where you see like Scorsese hitting down with some of the leaders of the Osage Nation, but it was just like a few individuals. I didn't know if it was like a few hundred people or a few thousand people. It's like the equivalent of a small town or whatever the case might be. But yeah, I don't have any. They didn't elaborate on like what is Osage like in the present day.
Yeah. But the movie is messy, and but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed its fidelity, its attempt at being as accurate as possible to history. But yeah, it's a little messy. It's a little messy. Some of the
I guess, does it work for you as a flick? I mean, does it work to you as well to you as something like Wolf of Wall Street or The Irishman or Silence, like some of his more recent offerings? Is it on that level? Is it too scattered to be a completely satisfying experience? But help me put it in context in relation to some of his other movies, because I would say I enjoyed it more than some of his movies like The Aviator, or what the hell is that one where Leo plays the cop who's Shutter Island. Like, I feel like in the aughts, Scorsese was starting to slide, or I like it more than something like Hugo, but it's definitely not as outrageously entertaining as something like Wolf of Wall Street. I mean, Wolf of Wall Street, between the money, the drugs, the sex, the nudity, they're throwing a lot of red meat to the audience to keep you on the hook, keep you engaged, keep you interested. And as you feel like you've gone to like a fucking orgy mixed with like a rock concert by the end of Wolf of Wall Street. Irishman, though, I mean, that movie is 4 hours long. I saw it at the New York Film Festival, where he and Pacino and De Niro and Pesci were all there to be interviewed. And so it's very easy for me to get kind of like swept up in the excitement of watching them talk about the movie. And I was like, I never even really paused to think, like, well, did I like that 4 hour experience or not?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like it better than Shutter Island. I would probably rank it higher than The Irishman. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's. I'm still wrestling if there was a better focus or a better way to tell it. If it should have been more of an ensemble.
Are you going to see it again in the theater, do you think?
Yeah, I probably will. Well,
I mean, I've been more of an ensemble. I'll tell you one person from the ensemble I could have used less of: Brendan Fraser. When he started, I don't know, caterwauling in the middle of the trial, I was like, what's going on here? Is this like, are y'all doing like a self-parody? But suddenly he's like, like this weird high-pitched wailing. What am I alone, or was that some of the worst acting ever captured on a movie camera?
It was strange. It was strange. It was strange. You know, I wasn't sure what was going on there too. I mean, there are a few scenes in the movie where I was like, what the fuck is, you know?
All right, so lay it on me. Give me some criticisms.
What are the things that really threw you? But that's what I love. I mean, but that's kind of what I like about Scorsese, is that he does take those big swings, and sometimes it's like, okay, I'm not exactly sure what that was. You know, even his cameo at the end was sort of like,
that didn't work for me at all. Yeah, suddenly switching to like a radio program to like, it would have been very basic, but if they just done a closing bit of text saying like the following things happened in the closing years, I just felt like it was almost like too cute or too self-aware, too self-conscious, turning it into like a radio show at the end and having Scorsese stepping up there. But I get what they were going for. It just didn't completely, totally. I loved like the last hour of the movie right up until the radio program.
I kind of like the radio program when Scorsese came out. I mean, I guess I kind of know. I mean, yeah, it just feels too like meta, beyond. You know, if it's just him being cute, which I don't think it is, because it's supposed to be so serious, you know. But as he's reading it, so then it's like, you know, is this sort of his own kind of admission of like, I'm, you know, a white interloper trying to tell this story, you know, and which is fine, but at the same time, like, I don't need to see that in the actual movie itself.
Yeah, like, I would have been just fine with just like Leonardo DiCaprio doing voiceover narration as we see some text and just kind of wrap things up.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess since it's the end of the film too, you know, it's you know, and it does cut to the modern day Osage and everything. So I guess maybe he figures at the end, you know, it's over. Just kind of like Joe Pesci shooting at the camera at the end of Goodfellas. I mean, that's also a very meta touch that I think definitely works better, but it's still.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess like the laugh is that like 99.9% of the people who see Joe Pesci at the end of Goodfellas have never seen The Great Train Robbery, don't understand that it's an homage to like one of the most iconic shots in the early days of the Western genre. But I feel like, yeah, it's a wink to the film nerds. But I think, yeah, most people saw Goodfellas like, oh, that's a really hardcore, cool way to end the movie. But they never thought beyond that.
Well, you know, actually, when I first saw the movie, I was very young. I didn't put together the connection to the Great Train Robbery, and I was like, that's kind of a weird ending. You know, shooting at the audience, and I was like, all right. So, yeah. So there was that, and there were certain things like, and spoilers, I guess. like when the mother was dying, and he's sort of depicting this sort of, this Osage concept of the afterlife, where her ancestors are taking her. I thought it worked when she just saw them, but then it's just sort of this long drawn out scene where they're walking and they're like tripping over stuff, like they're not, and it's just like
just seeing them would have made them feel more like a ghostly apparition or more spiritual, or just like those scenes where the owls come in to visit people, like those I found those to work really, really well. But yeah, just a shot of the ancestors might have been more effective, because the moment somebody stumbles over a rock makes them seem more mundane and physical and that sort of thing.
Yeah, it just kept going, and it felt a little weird.
Well, the whole movie for me, just everything always felt like it kind of missed like the emotional peaks. Like I was enthralled by just the spectacle of the production, but as I said in my review, everything just felt like it needed to have the screws tightened. Like it just, you could have tightened up the length, tightened up the scenes, like have scenes end on their emotional peak and like keep the momentum going. There was just a lot of kind of air and decompression in the story, where sometimes it felt like almost like improvisational at times. And I'm so accustomed to seeing these airtight, just razor sharp screenplays. And obviously Thelma Schoonmaker has been editing with Scorsese for 50, 60 years at this point. She's, world-class editor. I feel like they were, because they knew the film was going to play to a large part on Apple TV Plus, they didn't feel as incentivized to tighten it up to the degree that they would with something like, say, Casino, where obviously they're like, shit, this is going to play in theaters. We need to sell fucking tickets. Let's tighten up our game.
Yeah.
Commercial constraints are a great source of discipline for some filmmakers, knowing that in the end you're going to be judged by your performance. But now Apple has a completely different model, and so if you look at what incentivizes people, that's always going to tell you like where things are going to go. And I feel like Apple's going to need to learn to incentivize filmmakers to deliver razor sharp entertainment, irrespective of where it's going to end up.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the length is not so much of an issue, because I wasn't necessarily bored. I did have to get up and pee at one point. I think I knew the story well enough that I don't think I missed an important scene. But I just felt that maybe, but I did feel that I felt that a lot of the focus made a lot of it feel redundant or repetitive after a while. And like I was saying too, is that and it's understandable, but it almost feels like when you're getting the scenes of the Osage, like the elders and everything like that, it almost feels like Scorsese just pointed a camera at them, and it's just like, here's some dialogue, but it's like almost, they don't feel like they're developed. You know what I mean? Whereas when you see all the side characters of this crusty old cowboy with a blue eye, or this this guy here, and you could, and all these guys just feel that it just feels that with the depiction of the Osage, it almost felt like Scorsese was almost so deferent that he never even developed them. He almost didn't even know how to find a way into to fully allow his creative freedom within that. I could be wrong. I don't know.
The crazy drunken sister, that I felt like she seemed to emerge as a character, just because we see so many scenes where she's, drawing firearms on guys that are like harassing her in bars and that sort of thing. I feel like you have to be willing to show people's flaws to make them feel like real human characters. And because this story is filled with so many kind of loathsome, like highway robbermen and enforcers and assassins and that sort of thing, like Scorsese obviously throughout his life has watched a hell of a lot of crime films, a hell of a lot of Westerns. And I feel like he's got a natural aptitude for fleshing out these more violent, unsavory characters. But because the sister was such a drunken, gun-toting hellraiser, he seemed to have a better affinity for her character than someone like the village elders, like, speaking in that big council and that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, amongst obviously the sister, and then I can't remember the character's name offhand. The one that's, I remember the character is getting cuckolded by Roy Bunch. I remember the name Roy Bunch. And he was more developed and that, but I mean, I don't know. I could be wrong. I don't know if anyone else feels this way about the two things. It just felt like one aspect was developed and one wasn't.
Yeah, I would say in a wide range of reactions. I think this is one of those movies where, because of the subject matter, naturally it's going to provoke a wide range of responses. Due to the length, it's provoking a wide range of responses. And also, you have, people who are 20 who maybe they've seen one, maybe two movies by Scorsese, and then you have the nerds who have, are familiar with his entire career. And I guess I'm just because I'm, I have more affinity with the diehard Scorsese freaks. I'm more interested in hearing whether or not it kind of is cracked into the top 10. Like for me, my top 10 Scorsese movies going into this all came between Mean Streets and Casino, like early 70s to mid 90s. My top 10 remains the exact same coming out of it. But did it threaten to crack into your top 10 at all?
My top 10 Scorsese movies? Probably not. No, probably not. I'd have to think, but no, I don't think so. At least not right now at this point.
Yeah, because I keep waiting to hear from somebody that it's like one of their favorite movies they've seen in recent memory. Like usually when a big giant prestigious movie comes out, you've got, your wide range of responses, but I haven't seen any comments yet or any kind of quotes on Twitter, people saying like, oh my God, it's just Scorsese bringing his A game. Like even Rob Cotto, when it's on Wrong Reel the other night, and Rob Cotto is the biggest Scorsese freak that I know. I kept trying to like pull a spoiler-free review out of him. It's like, oh, it's fine. Like he wouldn't like elaborate any further. I was like, all right, well, like who are the really vocal defenders of the movie? And I haven't really seen somebody articulate like the great defense of the film yet.
Oh yeah, it's getting great reviews and everything, and I hope I'm not coming off too hard on it because I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it on a level, like I said, because I enjoyed it on a level of authenticity and accuracy. So that's something that maybe a lot of other people, that's not gonna be as important to them. But no, I still think it's good, and
It's at
found it
92
very nice.
on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's at 86 with audience scores. So yeah, that's anytime a movie gets 92 and 86, because usually you'll see a situation where critics love something and the audience is like, what the fuck are you talking about? Or the reverse. Critics loathe something, but it's got like a 90% audience score. Very rarely do we see audience and critics kind of in lockstep. So yeah, maybe you and I are both being too harsh. Maybe you and I are just two bitter old assholes who aren't seeing this transcendent experience that's staring us square in the face.
Oh yeah, well, we're definitely bitter old assholes. That's definitely the case. But no, I just think that I it's a movie I have to kind of to sit with and see again and really delve into.
Well, I'm always backing you into a corner on Wrong Reel about the strict definition of a Western in terms of the setting and the period. Does this qualify?
No. I'd say it's Western adjacent, but it's out of my time frame, and just slightly though. But if it's out of the time frame, it has to really be, I think, overtly Western. Like it really has to be like very Western in terms of genre tropes or things. You know what I mean? If it's set like in 1921, but everything about it is like a Western, it has all the tropes and everything, then I'm gonna lean towards that. This doesn't really, it doesn't feel like a Western. It has scenes that feel like a Western, but it's not. It's Western.
I'm trying to think hard about scenes that might have felt like a Western. Like even like out in like the boonies where like people are like, making moonshine and whatnot. Those felt more like prohibition era gangster movies than Westerns. Or anytime they're out in the middle of nowhere, they're always going by car. It's not like there are a lot of scenes riding around on horseback. So yeah, the whole movie did feel very modern to me. So yeah, I don't regard it as a Western either. I don't even know if I would regard it as like Western adjacent, but it definitely gave Scorsese an opportunity to show off his skills photographically in terms of capturing like the great American Midwest. And I'm just thrilled that he finally got a chance to get out into the boonies and make a movie like this, because if people who watch Personal Journey with Martin Scorsese through American movies, he's a Western lunatic. He fucking adores Western. He grew up on him. Like one of his earliest memories is his mother taking him to see Duel in the Sun because it had been banned by the Catholic Church, been labeled Lust in the Dust. So the mother was like, oh, well, I must see just for like, for educational purposes what this is all about, but dragged like the 4-year-old Martin Scorsese along. So he's had a lifelong love affair with the genre. So I'm glad he finally at least got to play with some cowboys and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and then I promised you before that when we talked about this, I would mention the time that Scorsese almost made a different Native American themed film. Do you know that?
I think I've already forgotten. So yeah, lay it on me.
Okay, I just posted it on my Twitter too. So I could be telling you the story somewhat wrong. So people could go to my Twitter and find the actual, direct story. But basically, Marlon Brando, this was in the early 70s, wanted to do a native themed film. He didn't know what the story was going to be, but he wanted something to be native themed. And so he was friends with, these different Native American activists.
And just before or after the Godfather scandal, where he had the award accepted on his behalf.
This was after.
Gotcha. Okay.
So he becomes friends with these Indian activists. One of them being Russell Means. Russell Means, is one of the great Indian activists of the 20th century. Later in his life, he became an actor, and he is Chingachgook in Last Mohicans.
Oh shit, he's fucking awesome. Yeah, he's incredible.
Yeah. So Brando had seen Mean Streets, and he said, "We got to get this Scorsese guy. He could direct it." So Scorsese, they go to meet. I don't even think Brando meets with them, but Scorsese goes. He meets with the Indian activists. He meets with like the producer of the film. He brings his then girlfriend at the time, and at one point I think they're at a club or at a bar or something. The producer wants to go home. Scorsese wants to go home. Scorsese's girlfriend wants to stay out and dance and drink and everything. So Russell Means, he goes, "You deadheads go home. I'll be back in an hour." Right? He said, and so basically Scorsese takes a cab with this guy, and the next day the producer gets a call from Scorsese, and he goes, "Hey, did Russell Means ever bring my car and my girlfriend back?" And they were like, "No, what are you talking about?" So then after that, like the producer said to Brando, like, "Hey, I don't think that Scorsese is going to do it." And later on, when Scorsese was asked about it, he said that he left the project because of political problems with the natives. So anyway, that it took him 50 years to to let those wounds heal.
Yeah, but it's incredible is that, like, how Scorsese's career now, like if you count his early short films, he's been going since the early 60s. His career spans almost half the lifespan of the art form of cinema itself. Like if we take like 1895 as like the birth of cinema, and Scorsese, I think his first like experimental movie, like low budget movie, was like 1959. But it's just incredible how he stands astride the latter half of this art form that he's dedicated his entire life to. And yeah, I guess as much as I love some of the individual movies like Goodfellas or After Hours or Color of Money or Last Waltz, Mean Streets, Taxi Driver, I mean, just so many good ones. I guess what I love more than anything is just his preservation of film history and his acting as curator, and also just being like a really vocal champion for obscure old movies and that sort of thing. And so I don't know if this movie ultimately will be as fondly regarded as some of the Westerns that he admires. But I think, when he moves on, we're going to miss him. And I guess, do you think he's going to make another movie, or do you think he'll kind of retire quietly, or what does the future hold for the 80? He'll be 81 like in 2 weeks. So I've
heard he's already been talking about other projects. Didn't he? Isn't there some other thing that he like just signed on to or something?
He very well might have. I mean, Apple and Netflix and Amazon and all these streaming platforms, all these tech giants, they seem to recognize if you want some prestige, but not necessarily great box office, give this aging legend opportunities, and who knows, he might give you something really special. But obviously with Netflix, I don't know how they regard if a film is a success or not, because obviously what they want is subscribers. Irishman barely played theatrically. This is the first time that where Apple has made a big theatrical play with any of their kind of direct-to-video content they've been creating. I think it's opening in 3,700 theaters. So I'll be curious to see just how much of a theatrical player Apple wants to be, because they've got Napoleon being distributed by Sony in a couple weeks. Then they have Argyle, the Matthew Vaughn film, being distributed by Universal in February. I hope Apple will emerge as this giant new studio, because some of the studios seem to be struggling so mightily, but it seems like, yeah, they love guys like Scorsese. So I think as long as he's able to work, they will continue to give him chances to do so. But $200 million, yeah, it's a lot of money, but Apple can afford it.
Yeah. And it's nice seeing him get these huge budgets, at this point, this late in his career and everything. And yeah, beyond all his stuff that he's done for film preservation and all that, like I said before, I just respect that he takes risks, and sometimes they don't pan out. That's the thing. If a filmmaker takes risks, some of those are not going to work for you.
What's an example for you where he took a giant risk, but it did work?
Where it did work?
Yeah.
Where it did work. I mean, fuck, his whole filmography to an extent. I mean, just his willingness to get weird. What is it?
You into a corner, man.
When has he not taken a risk? I don't know. It's like what do I think?
The riskier part of his career was from Who's That Knocking at My Door in the late 60s up through Kundun. I feel like after Kundun, when he got the chance to make Gangs in New York, suddenly he was dealing with much bigger budgets than he had dealt with previously. Although Casino was a big step up as well. But people forget that in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, like there was a period where Scorsese was like possibly looking at like a career destruction, like right around the time of King of Comedy, when it really fell flat on its face. He had to reinvent himself with After Hours, Color of Money, Last Temptation of Christ, etc. But then in the 21st century, it's been all these giant films like The Aviator and things like that. I guess I regard 70s, 80s, and 90s as the more kind of risk-seeking part of his career, where he got to be kind of an elder statesman in the 21st century.
Yeah. I mean, that might be true. I mean, I guess I just mean like his riskiness in the sense that he's willing to do things, whether they're the shots or cutaway or that could come off as absurd or ridiculous, and it's a fine line.
Like DiCaprio's, he's either sucking or snorting cocaine out of a girl's, or I think he's using a straw to put cocaine into a girl's.
Yes.
And Wolf of Wall Street. Yeah, I mean, you're taking the world's most beloved movie star and putting him in a compromising situation. Yeah, that is a risk.
Yeah. I mean, content-wise, definitely. But I mean, even thinking, and I know this is the 90s, but I even think back to just like in Casino, where he has like a shot, like it's a straw's eye view of cocaine. It's like a nostril's eye view of a straw with cocaine going. I mean, it's stuff like that is like, he's a serious, weighty filmmaker, but he has those kind of crazy light touches or stylistic things that, and like I'm saying, just like the trying to portray like the this Osage afterlife, that was a risk that I don't think worked, but I respect it. And there's a lot of things that he does in this movie that, a lot of I mean, overall, it's a gorgeous film, but it's not. I don't think it's like a Days of Heaven quality, piece of like.
What about is it on the level of Assassination of Jesse James in terms of visuals?
It's more. It's less maybe stylistically coherent, maybe. But just like a lot of those shots in this, like when the fires through the windows, and you have the guys that are supposed to be trying to put out the fire, and the horse guys riding through. I mean, some of those shots were just hypnotic and amazing, or them with the oil,
where the heat and the flames just distorting the image. And he'd experimented a bit with that with the Raging Bull, where there's some shots in the ring where he quite literally had like a little tray of burning coals beneath the camera to warp the light and the imagery. And yeah, he probably knows more about the manipulation of imagery to tell a story than any other director alive, where it's like, if there's a trick out there, he knows how to do it, or perhaps even invented it. And so I never get tired of watching him move the camera just I feel like he understands how to move the camera in a way to enhance the emotions of the story better than most directors, where a lot of times people would just move the camera because they kind of don't know what else to do with themselves. They're just showing off their technical virtuosity. Scorsese knows, like, move the camera organically, and it'll definitely enhance your movie overall. But I haven't heard you say anything good or bad yet about the great Robert De Niro. So how did you regard his performance? I thought his accent sounded a little generic and a little cartoony or a little caricaturish. And I think some people are going to resent that because they love him as a performer so much. I think the accent for me was distracting, but where do you stand?
I don't think his accent was very good. I think we've talked before about it. He's not great at accents, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even in a film as great as Taxi Driver, it's like, you know, like Travis Bickle's like supposed to be from the Midwest, right? And he's like clearly New Yorker.
Yeah.
But honestly, it wasn't as bad. It's probably, you know, you're probably more sensitive to it, you know, than I am.
But there's certain actors in here where the accent's incredible. Like Lily Gladstone, she's not from the South, but I think she's from rural Montana. When she's kind of doing that laid back drawl, it's convincing. Or when Jesse Plemons shows up, you're like, oh, that dude, he grew up in Texas. It sounds convincing. Or the actor from No Country for Old Men who's in the gas station scene with Javier Bardem when they're talking about the quarter. He's got a pretty sizable role in this. Like, his accent is very convincing. But as I mentioned in my review, that when when Leonardo DiCaprio is acting opposite of Jesse Plemons, I noticed that it almost seems like Leo like drank a shot of espresso or took a line of cocaine. Like, he seems to really kind of crank it up a bit when acting opposite Jesse. Maybe he's almost trying to compete. Like, oh shit, he's got a real accent. I better dial things up even more. And it almost came across as like hammy. But I on the whole, I did like Leo's accent, but it reminded me quite a bit of Django Unchained, as well as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, where he's got kind of his hick accent that he does the same way like Brad Pitt did with Inglourious Bastards. He had his accent there, and then he used like the exact same accent in 12 Years a Slave. Like your one Southern accent you know how to do, so you just keep reusing it.
And he's supposed to be from Canada in that one, I think, right?
I can't remember, but anyway, he does the exact same accent that he did in Inglourious Bastards. So
yeah, well, so like I guess I already went in expecting Robert De Niro to not do a great Southern accent. I think I was just happy that it wasn't like the Cape Fear accent, or what was that one?
You were my lawyer.
Yeah, counselor. Yeah. Or the one where what was that one with like Cuba Gooding Jr. as a diver or some shit from the Navy? I
didn't see it.
De Niro, I didn't see it either, but there were just all these. I always see these trailers, and De Niro was like this drill sergeant with the worst Southern accent. So I actually went in like, it's fine. Yeah, I'm still.
Speaking of De Niro, how come they didn't use subtitles more often? Because I know there's some scenes where people are speaking in Osage and there were subtitles, and many sequences where there were not. What was going on there, do you think?
I have no idea. I guess when they wanted you to know what they were saying. I guess I don't know. I don't have any insight to that.
But I just found it distracting. I was like, either give me no subtitles ever. Like, I feel like in The Godfather, like there's that like the famous scene where Michael pulls out the gun and kills Sterling Hayden as well as Salazzo. There are no subtitles in that scene, but the guy's speaking in Italian quite a bit. But you can tell it's like you're almost kind of being put in Michael's head as he's got other things on his brain as he's waiting for his moment to pull the gun. I just thought it was weird how anyway, I just felt like it seemed inconsistent in terms of allowing the audience to understand what the hell is going on. Or maybe they didn't want to use subtitles to really force you to listen. Because if you have subtitles, you just kind of read the subtitles, but just ignore what they're saying. Maybe in the absence of subtitles, it did force the audience just to hear the language more about. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm not. I don't know. I'm not sure about that. But with De Niro's character too. Like, once again, it's like when you do know about the history, it's one of those things where when you read about the real guy, he seems so ridiculous. I mean, the part in the movie, and I don't know if it played out exactly the same way, but when he takes the native guy to the doctor, and they're like, "Are you gonna kill this Indian?" And he's like, "Yep." Yeah. I mean, he really did say that. I don't know if he actually said it in front of the guy, but he really was kind of like, he
Yeah,
was just,
insuring him to collect the insurance a few months later. Yeah.
but yeah. And so it's like, it's just, some of his movies are so difficult because with Leonardo DiCaprio's character, when he would be, and I'm going to stop criticizing the movie. I'm going to talk about some of the things I like in a minute.
The floor is yours. But you keep drawing yourself back to the criticisms. I keep trying to tease out of you, like, what are the things that you love? You're like, so yeah.
Well,
I'll stay here as long as you like, but I guess at a certain point you will have to.
Yeah. But it was hard to even reconcile when DiCaprio was supposed to be this loving guy and when he was supposed to be so ruthless. It felt like, and even watching the movie, even like it was like, wait, how much of this does he actually know, and how much does he not know? How much is it that he's just stupid and they're hinting at it? For me,
he felt like a dupe or a stooge right up to the point where De Niro wants him to sign something. He's like, we're all signing this, like, just sign it. And then you can see like the hesitation. That's where Leo starts to realize, oh, like I might be getting set up as the fall guy or getting thrown under the bus, like whatever phrase you want to use. But it seems like he's largely naive and easily influenced for like the first 2 hours, just because he does like money and he likes alcohol. And we see him committing violent crimes with like road gangs and that sort of thing. So I'm not trying to sell him as some sort of like really innocent, naive person, but I think he thought of himself. I think he thought that, in general, that his uncle's plan would allow him to enjoy a certain level of wealth and prosperity. But I don't think he ever fully thought through, like, what is the end game or the end goal of this elaborate plan? And that is to kill people off and rob them of their oil money.
Yeah. And that is well portrayed. He is well portrayed as this sort of dunce who kind of, I mean, in many ways, is very similar to the Irishman, Frank Sheeran, of just kind of this guy who just kind of follows orders, just kind of this idiot, It was just the extremes of the ruthlessness, and then just like this. It was hard to get a grasp of his character, and not in a sense of like he's a complex character. It's just like, in this moment he's like this, and in this moment he's like that. And sometimes they put these lines like that. It's like maybe. So he keeps, I do love that money. It's like, all right. Then later, I love the money, maybe even more than my wife. And it's like, all right, do we need that? So I guess the biggest thing that I'm wrestling with is just the focus on his character, and maybe more viewings, I'll those issues will be ironed out, or I'll understand what they're going for. But in terms of positives, like most of the small roles, or the small like vignettes, the old cowboy with like the milky eye, I mean, that guy's great. Every scene with him is great. Him drinking with the guy that he's got to murder and becoming friendly with him and everything. Like all that stuff was, I thought was great. All the small roles, all that kind of texture that Scorsese brings to things, the way that they're able to get so much exposition out in really intelligent, like clever ways that aren't too groan inducing or obvious. So yeah, there's so much about it that is excellently done, brilliantly done. But it's just those flaws, they stick out. They're hard not to focus on right at the beginning.
So how well do you think this movie is going to do? Like, first in terms of just box office, but awards, but just in terms of people who love crime films and love like Western adjacent movies, or love Scorsese movies, like a year from now, will people look back on this as like a real highlight in what is an otherwise very strange year, with like so many flops and so many movie productions that have been basically like suspended due to the strikes? Like, it's a very unconventional year as far as 2023 is concerned, but also a year has all these weird spikes where these movies really take off and do really well. Like, no one in a million years would have ever anticipated that Oppenheimer would make nearly $1 billion worldwide. But it's
Yeah.
a 3-hour movie with people largely talking in rooms with dramatic music playing in the background. And for whatever reason, it just took off. So like, what do you anticipate Killers of the Flower? Because I think the tracking is that it's going to open around like 25 million domestic, which seems okay for Apple's first big stab at a wide release.
Well, I don't think it's gonna do. I mean, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't know. The Oppenheimer's success baffles me. I mean, it's not. I don't know. I mean,
Gotcha.
I think it's a good thing that everyone went and saw it and I loved it and everything. But I have no idea why that was huge. So
Yeah,
and I'm not gonna tell my opinions on that movie.
Yeah, well, it's like William Goldman wrote years ago, like 40 years ago, in Adventures in the Screen Trade. Nobody knows anything, and it's like the most. I think it's like the wisest thing anyone ever said about showbiz, where like even the most legendary filmmakers alive will make unexpected hits or unexpected failures, like Spielberg. Who knows more about making hits than Spielberg? Nobody. And yet, West Side Story made like $2 million. Like it just completely fucking died and fell on its face. Everybody's like, "Whoa, that's like the biggest flop of his career," etc. And so, yeah, I don't know what it will take for Apple to regard this as a slam dunk experiment or a success. But I guess we'll know after Napoleon has come out, after Argyle's come out, we'll know whether or not they want to remain in this space, like a big push behind theatrical films. Do you think it'll win any Oscars? Do you think it'll be like when it comes to like, I mean, I feel like costumes is obvious, production design by Jack Fisk, obvious, DP, obvious. I think Lily Gladstone will get nominations. I still think Emma Stone will win for Poor Things. But do you think that the chattering classes will be fond to, or think of it fondly when it comes to nominations?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. I am not the guy to talk about
Gotcha.
Oscars.
What about the diehard like lunatics in your circle of Western enthusiasts? I feel like I enjoy Westerns. I like talking about Westerns. I like watching Westerns. But I feel like you've got all these like secret rooms where you hang out with like the true diehards, like the most diehard like 5 Western fans that you know. What do you think they're going to think about this flick?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't know the diehard Western fans. I don't know if I know. Yeah, I don't know. I'm
all about the hard hitting questions here on this YouTube channel.
Yeah, I'm not the guy that asked. I don't know. I watch old westerns. I don't know what people like anymore. I'm the most antiquated fucker in the world. I don't know. But I feel that it's probably going to get a lot of Oscar nominations and everything. I don't. Everyone seems to be taking with Oppenheimer right now. Something else will probably come out that will sweep things. But I don't. Yeah, I don't necessarily see it taking everything.
Yeah, because Wolf of Wall Street made $400 million. Like Wolf of Wall Street was, I think, Martin Scorsese's biggest success he ever released commercially. And I just think this movie has none of the qualities. I mean, Lily Gladstone, I find her very easy on the eyes, and all this cuddling scenes. Like, yeah, she seems very cuddly. I'm trying to think, not cuddle a bull, but anyway, someone who's prone to being cuddled. But obviously, having Margot Robbie full frontal nudity in Wolf of Wall Street, yeah, that's going to sell a lot of tickets and that sort of thing. So,
yeah, this one had a little less nudity than Wolf of Wall Street, unfortunately. Yeah.
But a lot of gunshots to the back of the head, like every once in a while, like during some of these assassination sequences and some of the real violent sequences, like suddenly I realized, like, oh, this is the guy who made The Departed and Casino and Mean Streets and Goodfellas, etc. I feel like, yeah, he has not lost a step when it comes to depicting on-screen violence.
Yeah, he's getting more. I think the way he portrays it has become more matter of fact.
Yeah, almost like Howard Hawks. Like it's brief and explosive and intense, and then you move on.
Yeah. My only complaint, just because I'm a sicko, is I don't like the digital squibs. But I know that for what he's doing, because he's trying to do it such he's not trying to do a series of cuts or what I mean. It's just supposed to be kind of this loose impact, and so he does it in a way that works, but I still want to see the ketchup fly on the walls. I still want to see
so many movies these days using digital squibs, and every single time, like, that looks fake. Oh, that looks fake. And yeah, just like, I grew up in the era, like when I think of movies like Total Recall, where Arnold is using somebody as a shield as everybody's shooting at him, and like 50 squibs go off of like this guy's back, and you're just like, oh, like gross, but like it looks so real, it's so visceral, and it's caught in camera. Just I've been conditioned to expect squibs, and I'll never get over that.
Yeah, well, it's like, it's one of those. It's like it's a controlled piece of chaos. It's just like blowing up a model. It's like it's controlled, but where's it going to splatter? Or where the debris? And you can't do that with an algorithm that just put the squib button on them.
Yeah.
It ruins the fun.
Yeah, like when you're watching Videodrome and the guy blows his own head off, and you see just like pieces of like, I guess it was like dog food and all kinds of crap they had inside there, but like the way the unpredictable nature by which it like spreads and expands and kind of still clings together. Yeah, you just cannot create that digitally, or at least we have not gotten there yet. I mean, we're still a far way away, but we've been going a little bit more than an hour at this point. I want to make sure that we get to all the points about the film that you find to be important. So what have we not addressed? Like what are the areas of the film that we haven't even scratched the surface yet?
I'm trying to think. There's a lot to take in. I'm still trying to remember the whole thing.
Yeah, like say something very like make a strong, bold claim that you might regret tomorrow, but you feel it right now.
Oh, back to the squibs just real quick, because it kind of I respect the fact that it's more matter of fact in this movie. I don't necessarily want to see a gore fest of the Osage murders. So I just want to put that out there. Like, I respect that, he was using digital scripts to just do these kind of like no nonsense,
and there's plenty of shit kicker on shit kicker violence as well. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not asking to see like, the Herschel Gordon Lewis version of the Osage murders or anything like that. But in terms of anything else about it, I don't know. I might just have to sit and ruminate for a bit. But so I mean, I think
as far as other 21st century westerns go, and admittedly, it's not a western, but it's pretty close. How do you think it measures up? Like if I were to say, because I know you have a lot of fondness for the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, how does it compare to something like that?
I prefer the assassination of Jesse James to this, but I will say that when I first saw the assassination of Jesse James, I wasn't like overly enthusiastic about it either. There were things about it that didn't work or that felt awkward or and so that's why if I'm coming off as too negative, it's just my mind is just in a swirl, and so oftentimes when you go into a movie and you don't know, I guess once you already know what to an extent what they're going to do, you can kind of you can understand why they were doing it. As opposed to
like once you know the movie that actually exists, you stop measuring up against the movie that you would have liked to have seen in your head. And like, all right, well, this is the movie that we have. Let's digest it and figure out what works and what doesn't. And I think Leo's performance will age well, but I'll need to see it again. I think Lily Gladstone her performance will definitely age well. I think people will remember fondly all the technical aspects, but I think it's going to be one of those things where for the next 10 years, whenever people talk about it, say, oh my God, I love that movie, but oh my God, it was fucking long. And I guess I saw one comment on my video where someone said that they were completely, totally entranced for like 3.5 hours. I think that's going to be the exception as opposed to the norm. So yeah, I don't anticipate this becoming like the big awards contender of 2023. I still think that it's going to belong to Poor Things. I think once Poor Things goes wide in December, it's going to, and also because it's coming out so late in the season, it's going to be the movie that people remember very vividly and very fondly. And also it's way shorter, and it does throw a lot of red meat to the audience. Like half the movie is just sex scenes. So I think, yeah, it's going to be very hard to compete with Poor Things.
Well, yeah, I mean, but like I said, I do still think I think it's a really good film, and I think it's worth seeing, and I think it's something I'm going to be thinking about. And yeah, I don't necessarily think it's I don't see it as a crowd pleaser or anything like that. But like I said, I personally was never bored with it. I was never I did have to pee at one point, so I was like, okay, this is. But that was really the only aspect of the runtime that I had an issue with. So I personally was never bored with it. I just sometimes I was just it was hard for me to sometimes get a handle on uh, some of the choices or where it was at. But I also think a lot of that is intrinsic to the story. The story is so wild and so insane that to do it, you almost have to like tamp it down to make it all feel more believable.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, but but I respect that Scorsese. He didn't do that. Like he just lets it be weird and strange, and he always does that. So,
Yeah. It's
yeah,
definitely not,
I
it's
like it a
not
lot.
boring, it's not forgettable, and yeah, it's not easily disposable, but it's just when you've made some of the best movies of the last half century, yeah, everybody's going to hold you up to very high, rigorous standards. But I think it will compare very favorably to the other Western that's coming out this weekend. Have you heard anything good or bad about Butcher's Crossing starring Nicolas Cage, the Buffalo Hunter movie?
I haven't heard a ton about the movie itself. A little here and there.
It's
I've
playing
read
in
the
one
book.
theater here in New York, and I almost decided to go this afternoon, but I knew we might possibly record. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to give myself a pass. I don't need to rush out and see Butcher's Crossing.
Oh, you don't tell me that. I don't want to keep anyone from seeing a Western. Come on now. Uh, um, I don't know. Yeah, I've read the book, and the book is pretty good. It's it's I think when it was written in the 70s or the late 60s, maybe I can't remember now, but it feels very much like a proto Cormac McCarthy, proto Blood Meridian uh, book in a lot of ways. But instead of like hunting scalps, they're just hunting buffalo, so it's a little less violent and bleak.
Yeah, a little less
Um,
upsetting. Well, speaking of McCarthy, have you heard any new news about Blood Meridian since we last discussed it on Wrong Reel?
no, I don't think so. No, outside of just the fact he was working on the script and then he died. But I don't
So
know.
he was doing the adaptation. I know he and his son were both attached as executive producers, but I didn't know if he was actually handling the scripting duties.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, according to John Hillcoat, so they felt that they'd cracked it, but he didn't finish the adaptation. But
Gotcha.
yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't. That's why when everyone was freaking out that he was making it, it was like if Cormac McCarthy's producing it, I don't think he's gonna. I think he's just gonna let any hack, off the street, off
He's
the
not going to
street.
cast Kate Blanchett as the
Master.
judge or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, he's not gonna do some shit that Ridley Scott was gonna do. We won't get into that.
Yeah. But another topic for another day. So as a way of just starting to wrap things up, I want to remind people that David's been on Wrong Reel. I mean, you must have been on Wrong Reel at this point 20 times, 30 times. Like, I really have no idea, but we have tackled so many great Westerns over the years. And if people just go over to wrongreel.com and just look up David Lambert, you'll see a whole shitload of episodes, like whether it's episodes about McCabe and Mrs. Miller or The Searchers or The Wild Bunch, whatever the case might be. We've got a nice library of conversations about classic Westerns now. But for people who are listening to this video or watching this video who have never heard of the words Wrong Reel and have never heard any of our previous episodes, what do you want to share about yourself and what you're working on, and just maybe perhaps any Western recommendations you might make, just as a way of kind of saying, hi, how are you to the YouTube crowd?
Oh yeah, well, anyone that's interested in westerns or old west history, I mean, I personally think that they should follow me on Twitter. I'm under David Lambert Art, and so there I post about old west history, western movies, western novels, western comic books. How does history relate to the movies? What do the movies get right? What did they get wrong? Um, how does history inform the movies? I'm not I get into like very specifics, like I'll have long threads about what the cut of how their pants were, or that they didn't have belt loops, or all that kind of minutia, if you're interested in that. But also I will get into things like the historical origins of like Winchester 73, which is not a movie that people necessarily associate with being based on a true story, very, very loosely, but it is inspired by actually some true people. I mean, it's all changed and everything. But
you got Wyatt Earp and Virgil Earp popping up early on. So
well, that is true too. But everything but if you go to my Twitter, you can find that. But Yeah, so it's just an analysis of how do Westerns relate to history. It's not a thing where I get on Westerns for being incorrect or anything like that. Sometimes I mean, I like to get into things that they might not get correct, but it's never as so much of a criticism. Like I understand how stories and how history has to change, and that's what I
Sometimes a
like to
gun
talk about.
just looks cool, even if it hadn't been invented at the time of where the story is taking place.
Yes, exactly. I mean, when it comes to fiction and all that, I'm always the person that I think that history should inform it or it should inspire it, but nothing should necessarily be a slave to it. If the story doesn't work or anything like that, I always prefer if they change the names if they go too wild off of history. But anyway, but it's just anything Western related. I think you're going to find something on my account worthwhile. And then I also have a Patreon. I do a lot of art. Some of it's movie related art. Most of it's naked ladies.
And sometimes it's like a loving portrait of Harry Dean Stanton or Warren Oates, and sometimes it's just astonishingly beautiful girls. And I've got room in my heart for both.
I would hope that you do. I would hope that you do. So yeah, so David Lambert art on Instagram or Facebook. I don't remember what my figure drawing art account on Twitter is again. What is it? Figure art by? I don't remember. Just go to David Lambert art. I'll point
in the
to
video
that direction.
description below, I've got a link to David's main account, and I've also got a link to his Patreon account. So definitely make sure that you check those out. Well, just as a way of sending people out on a high note, if this is their first time hearing you speak and they're not aware of like the degree to which you like Westerns, what are 5 amazing Westerns that every Western enthusiast is familiar with, but that general fans perhaps are not as familiar with, like movies like Law and Order, a movie that you're always banging the drum on behalf of? Send us out on a high note where you recommend some movies that you love in the Western genre, but perhaps don't get the TLC you think they deserve. Because I feel like the Western genre, if people don't constantly kind of like celebrate the obvious ones, the next generations that are coming up, they just don't hear about McCabe and Mrs. Miller. They don't hear about Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid and that sort of thing.
Oh man, you gotta give me these questions in advance, man.
Well, I know Law and Order is one of them because you always talk about how, and it's only because people are talking about it so little that you feel like. So, give the pitch. What is Law and Order?
Well, Law and Order is the first. It's the first movie that's based on Wyatt Earp's time in Tombstone. It's not the first movie to have Wyatt Earp as a character, but it is the first one to have him as the main character. Of course, they didn't have the rights to his life, so they changed his name to Frame Johnson. And it stars Walter Houston, Harry Carey Sr., and it's just a very it's rough, it's gritty, it's in parts it's absurd, it's hilarious, it's just a very rich, strange early 30s Western that not enough people have seen. And it's a huge influence on every Wyatt Earp movie after that. You can see parts of Tombstone that are directly lifted from it. Even the much heralded ending of High Noon, where he throws his badge down in disgust, which was so controversial. John Wayne was so upset, supposedly, about that. But Law and Order ends with him throwing his badge down in disgust, So it has a crazy end gunfight that looks like something like a proto Peckinpah almost. But
it's like, well, it's like 32 or 33 or something like that. I mean, Peckinpah would have been not even born yet, I don't think.
Well, it's like a very Eisenstein sort of like montage style, and the gunfight. It has the amazing Andy Devine lynching scene, which is one of the funniest, saddest, strangest scenes in any Western. So it's
speaking of sad, strange Andy Devine scenes, when he sings, and what the hell is that Jacques Tourneur Western that we covered recently that you love? A Canyon Passage?
Canyon Passage.
Yeah. I don't know if anything will ever top that tone-deaf caterwaul on his part when he's singing at that wedding. But anyway, we'll have to do an Andy Devine episode at some point, the highs and lows of his illustrious career, because that way I can trap you into discussing Stagecoach.
Yeah, the top 5 Andy Devine movies. But I guess I'd put Law and Order there. I think that's a pretty obscure one. I would put Canyon Passage. I think it's gaining in reputation. but that's one I think that people should definitely check out. The Westerner, I don't think is too highly. I mean, it's well regarded, but I don't.
The William Wyler film.
Yes, yeah, the Gary Cooper, Walter Brennan movie. I love that one. There's a movie. There's a Randolph Scott movie. It's not a great Western, but it's called Coroner Creek, and it's really rough. It's pretty violent. It has a scene where a guy crushes Randolph Scott's hand. This is before The Man from Laramie. This is before Django. This is before One-Eye Jacks. Except in this scene, Randolph Scott immediately jumps up, beats the shit out of him, and then crushes his hand. So
Nice.
it's a rough fucking movie. And I think, unless I'm getting confused with another movie, I think there's a scene where Randolph Scott like holds a guy, as a human shield, and they're just loading him full of bullets. Of course, it's bloodless because it's like it's old early 50s movie, but it's like it's almost exactly like the scene from Total Recall. It's just without giant squibs. So.
Gotcha.
But so Coroner Creek, Law and Order, The Westerner, and what else did I say? What other ones?
The Scotch is starting to kick in. So yeah, but just because I feel like McCabe and Mrs. Miller and The Searchers and The Wild Bunch and some of these other films that we've celebrated in the past, they get so much love. And obviously for people who don't watch any Westerns, like it's all equally unfamiliar, but for the diehards, I feel like, the obvious films have definitely received their due. So I feel like I'm always trying to remember that for every podcast or video I do on the topic of Westerns, that for some people, they've never even heard somebody discuss Westerns in their lives. And for some people, they've been watching them for 50, 60 years. How do you make content that might appeal to both? And I feel like, just finding a blend of the unloved, unacknowledged classics, but also at the same time, reminding people what is the canon. So I'd love to get you back on at some point. Maybe just do like David Lambert's introductory guide to the Western for someone who has never seen a Western, like coming up with like 10 Westerns as like a sampler, a buffet to help induct people into becoming potentially fans of the genre.
I don't know. I thought of two though. Hell's Heroes and the Three Godfathers. The same story that fills out my top 5 of underrated Westerns.
Well,
but
done.
I'd be down for doing something like that.
Very cool. Yeah, just remember, like, there's an 18-year-old out there. Like, when you got into Westerns, like as a mid-late teen, there is a young David Lambert out there who doesn't even know what Westerns are, who's just waiting to be invited into that world, and you got to guide them by the hand into all these forbidden pleasures because there's so many fucking good ones.
Yeah, go to my Twitter, and I think that'll do it for you. I think it has a lot of info on the big ones, on the canon, but it has a lot of stuff about the obscurities and things like that. I'm not going to, I don't repost the same story of, Clint Eastwood cut his dialogue out in Fistful of Dollars or the million stories you hear over and over again. I try to.
That's because you're steeped in Western lore. That's the kind of thing you hear a lot about. But I think you also remember that, like, the great majority of movie lovers out there haven't even seen A Fistful of Dollars. And so it's like, always remember, you gotta throw out the gateway drugs to invite people in. And then the connoisseur is like, oh yeah, we've been there, we've done it, we bought the t-shirt, we know that fucking story, we don't even believe that story. But just remember, the diehards represent like a small portion of the movie going public.
Well, I just always try to post stuff that I would personally find interesting,
which is a very useful guide. Whether you're making movies or discussing movies, follow your passion, follow your obsessions. And that's what Scorsese has done over the years. He has followed his obsessions very successfully. So yeah, just a long story short, I really enjoyed Killers of the Flower Moon. I don't think it has the wow factor that some of his more outlandish films have, but goddamn, it's just the fact that here we are in 2023 and we're getting a Michael Mann movie, a Ridley Scott movie, a David Fincher movie, a Martin Scorsese movie, and a Christopher Nolan movie, all in the back nine, like in the latter half of the year. Like, it's very easy for people to get negative about film culture, but I'm like, yeah, any year where you have all these luminaries releasing movies, some of these, I mean, Ridley, Michael Mann, and Scorsese are all in their 80s. They're all octogenarians. I think that's incredible. Like, that is a cause for optimism that that film culture will still permit these aging legends to take one last rodeo, so to speak.
Yeah. It's like I said, it's nice that Scorsese is getting these kind of budgets. Am I fucking drunk right now? Stumbling over my words.
You've had 2 beers. I don't know. Usually you have to have like 12 or 15 before you start to get.
No, I had 3 beers during this podcast. You don't know
Oh,
what I
gotcha.
did before.
Fantastic.
But yeah, no, I think it's great, and I think that it's great that like I said, that he's I don't think he ever phones it in, for better or worse, usually for better. But
even with his movies that I like less, I feel like he was making a genuine, sincere effort to make the best movie possible. Whereas there's some other directors like, ooh, yeah, you must have been behind on your mortgage and you needed the money.
yeah, and I also am not. I also, as I get older, try not to approach movies in that sort of binary. Like I I can. There's things about movies that I can just appreciate, where if the movie, even if the engine of it isn't working, So did it work? Did it not work? I don't know.
Yeah, I've got three main responses to movies: love, hate, or indifference. And obviously there's shades of gray in between those. But in general, either I'm totally just uninterested even in discussing it, or I want to rip something a new asshole, or I want to put it on a pedestal. This movie is one of those tweeners where I definitely really liked it, but it's I think it's fair to draw attention to some of the flaws. And my main criticisms are De Niro seems a little off. It's way too goddamn long, but otherwise, yeah, you're not going to see any other movie like it this year or probably even next year. So everybody should definitely hunt it down and form their own opinion, which is what I always advise.
Yeah. And I'm a little different, because I'm a guy, like, I don't like, for example, I don't like the movie Tombstone, but I'm fascinated with the movie Tombstone. I've probably seen it more than most of the movies I love. I've probably researched it more, read about the making of it, So I'm kind of those people that I could be totally fascinated and enamored with aspects of a movie and appreciate things when I don't think the movie itself doesn't actually even fully work.
A classic example would be Unforgiven, a movie where I've heard you speak at length about its flaws, but then at the end you're like, oh, but just so everybody knows, I really, really like Unforgiven. But you'll say that like at the end of like a 2-hour screed, like about the things that you find to be less satisfying.
Well, with a lot of these movies, like, I love these movies, and it's almost like their qualities are things that are already a given. They've already been talked about. And so when I think a movie, it has enough value for that kind of analysis. I think Killers of the Flower Moon has enough value for this kind of analysis, where we can't start picking it apart. You know what I mean? Because I do think that its strengths are stronger than all these things that we're pulling at. And same thing, with Unforgiven, and the same thing with a lot of other movies. Like, if I think a movie is worthwhile, I'm going to be as harsh and ruthless with it as I can, because I think it can withstand it, and I think that you can understand the movie better, as opposed to
tough love. Yeah, Mike, on our episode about The Searchers, we address its flaws, like the fact that Scar is played by a guy who's about as Indian as I am, or the fact that I have so many like scenes shot on the back lot, which don't look authentic at all, next to scenes that were shot in Monument Valley, which are just majestic and awe-inspiring. Like, I have nothing but reverence for The Searchers, but it is a deeply flawed movie. It's a deeply flawed movie that happens to be one of the best movies ever made.
Yeah, and that is one of my Twitter threads, which is about the casting of Scar. And I think it's one of the huge flaws of the movie. But I did a whole thread not defending, or at least putting people in the headspace of John Ford, of what he was trying to portray, which was the mixed race of the Comanche, and that this character is sort of this Quanah Parker surrogate who did have blue eyes and everything. And so that was stuff that John Ford was trying to get out, he was trying to communicate the mirror image of him and John Wayne, and all these things. And so I would love to take something like that I think is a huge flaw, and the biggest thing, maybe the biggest flaw of the movie, perhaps, and then go, well, why is this there? Because John Ford was not a moron, and he wasn't a guy who's just put bronzer on any white dude. You know what I mean? He's still very intentional. So I like to be put in a position where I'm defending something that I don't necessarily think is good, because I want to understand what the filmmakers are trying to communicate. I don't want to be with those people that is like, he's an idiot or whatever, or at the same token, like Scorsese could do no wrong, like he's
that way lies danger. I do tend to hero worship filmmakers I admire completely out of proportion, and especially if they made movies prior to my birth. I look at the filmmakers from my own lifetime in a different light, whereas the ones from the past, like Ernst Lubitsch, I'm like, oh well, he's just like almost like one of the 12 gods of Olympus, whatever. Like, of course, I just need to revere him like a deity or a deity or whatever. And that's it's a great way to get very lazy in your film appreciation. Let's rip them apart and put them back together, because like you said before, the good ones can withhold or withstand that level of scrutiny just fine.
Yeah, and that's my whole approach to westerns, is that I think that it is such a great, rich genre that it can withstand picking it apart or saying where it comes short, or egregious things about its past, or you know what I mean. It is a great enough genre to withstand that type of stuff, but you have to. If you're not going to analyze it on that level, what are you even doing? I guess. What are we all working off here?
Absolutely. We're all
I mean, I am, but
that'll be our next live stream. Circle Jerk on Geeking with James Hancock. Well, I'm
yeah,
just thrilled
you
you
have
wanted to come on the
Pornhub
channel.
account?
Oh, I'm sorry. Say that again.
No, go ahead. No, I just didn't know if you were opening. I had a Pornhub account too that we
Absolutely.
could do a live stream on.
I keep debating when I'm going to have to do a top 10 Russ Meyer video, and whether or not I make it restricted, like age restricted, basically meaning that no one will ever see it unless they go looking for it. But I feel like that is the way to do it. But I need to make sure that I'm not going to get in any sort of trouble or get penalized or get I've been working on my channel now for several years, and I'm up to nearly 33,000 subscribers. I don't want to destroy it just for the sake of making a Russ Meyer video. But if I am going to make a Russ Meyer video, I want to do it justice. So I don't know. Maybe I'll put it on Vimeo first and see how it goes. But
yeah, that's that. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, test the waters. Don't torpedo everything for that.
Yeah, but
don't torpedo everything for those torpedoes.
Yeah, but it's very tempting, because I love doing top 10 videos, and yeah, Russ Meyer, he definitely deserves one. And Scorsese, that was easy, but Russ Meyer, going back to filmmakers who embrace risk, if I'm not going to embrace a little bit of risk on this channel, what are we doing here? So yeah, if you want to come back anytime and take acid on camera, or discuss Russ Meyer, or have a drinking contest, whatever, I'm just thrilled that you were willing to come on the channel and do a quick review. You mentioned before how you were going to be willing to give me a half hour of your time to review the film, but here we are, 90 minutes in, we're still going. So
I knew it was going to go this way, and I didn't even. Well, now I'm wondering, did I just keep repeating everything over and over again?
You could say it's like the form was following its function, because like Killers of the Flower Moon, where perhaps there were some scenes that were a repeat of what had come before, you were influenced by the epic you had just seen. And I think sometimes an immediate response right after seeing a movie is more honest, where you haven't had a chance to kind of hedge your bets. I feel like sometimes people get so careful and strategic in their praise or their criticism after they've had a chance to see what everybody's saying. Sometimes I like the fact that if you haven't read the reviews and you just walked out of the flick, someone puts a gun to your head and saying, "What did you think of this?" You get a real honest from the gut response. So I'm thrilled that we did it this way. And so yeah, anytime you want to do reviews like this, just let me know. I need the content.
For sure. Well, I hope this wasn't too incoherent. Yeah. A little less prepared than usual for me, but yeah. Whoops. Thanks for having me on.
Very cool. Well, we hope y'all have enjoyed this conversation. We hope we didn't spoil too many things. And if you're still with us and you haven't seen the movie yet, go see the flick in the cinema this weekend, because if we don't support movies like this with our dollars, with our eyeballs, movies like this will not get made in the future. But please remember to like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell. We can't thank you enough for watching, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards. All right, boom, hitting end stream.